Hi friends, it is Tuesdays with Tonya. I'm Tonya here with My County Link, and today we are exploring tax day. Today is tax day. So if you're like me, I always enjoy learning new things and why and the questions I always have. So I thought let's delve into a little bit about what is tax day? I mean, obviously we know it's time to file the taxes, but how did it take place? Like, why is there such a thing? And why was it moved back this year? And so forth. So I delved in a little bit. I got some information from the Wikipedia, and I also got some information from the PBS NewsHour. So I'm going to kind of put them a little bit together for you. So the reason that the federal income tax, it was briefly introduced with the Revenue Act of 1861 to help fund the Civil War, and subsequently repealed, readopted, and held unconstitutional. Now we're going to talk about why that is. The early taxes were based on assessments, not voluntary tax returns. Tax payment dates varied by act. So when it was held unconstitutional, it says the case of Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust Company challenged the constitutionality of the Wilson-Gorman Tariff Act of 1894, which taxed incomes over $4,000 at the rate of 2%. The case was decided by the United States Supreme Court in 1895. The Supreme Court decided that the Act's unapportioned income taxes on interest, dividends, and rents were effectively direct taxes. The Act was therefore unconstitutional because it violated the Constitution's rule that direct taxes be apportioned among the states. In 1913, 18 years later, the 16th Amendment to the United States Constitution was ratified. This amendment gave the United States Congress the legal authority to tax all incomes without regard to the apportionment requirement. So that's a little bit about the history of where tax day comes from. Now, in looking more, that was from the Wikipedia, and looking more from the PBS NewsHour, I kind of delved in a little bit more and got some other type of information that I found interesting. So typically, the traditional filing taxes came because at the end of the year, people needed a couple months to gather all their stuff together. It used to be, I know the Wikipedia said 4,000. PBS says it was 3,000 if it was single, and it was 4,000 if it was married people that were filing back at that date. And according to them at that time, that would be equivalent to $3,000 would have been equivalent to about $90,000 in that range for a single filer, and filers for over 4,000 married filers would be about $120,000 in today's dollars, respectively. So that's kind of what that was back then. So it was more reserved for the wealthy back then. So here we kind of move forward. We talked about how things got changed and why with the case there that they referred to. So we're going to bump up a little bit more here and talk a little bit more about that. So we talked about the original due date for individual tax returns used to be March the 1st. So it was just a year over after following the adoption of the 16th Amendment on February 3rd, 1913. And then in 1914, the threshold represented approximately the top 4% of the earners. So that's where we talked about filing a tax return was more of a burden reserved for the wealthy back then. Quickly realizing that many taxpayers needed more time to complete their returns, Congress pushed the tax deadline back to March 15th, effective 1919, and that tax day stood for 30 years. But with more taxpayers needing to file returns as the filing threshold declined and the tax laws grew in complexity, Americans needed even more time to complete their returns. So in 1954, Congress overhauled the tax system and adopted a major revision to the Internal Revenue Code. Okay. This change also came with an extension to the tax deadline for individuals, pushing the due date back again to the familiar April 15th. Now, the intent of giving taxpayers an extra month to prepare their tax returns was to allow more people the ability to file on time and often get refunds more quickly. Not only did this change assist taxpayers, but it also allowed the Internal Revenue Service more time to spread out its workload. The April 15th deadline proved to be a more reasonable deadline, and it has stuck with U.S. taxpayers for almost 70 years. So that is a little bit about how that works. So since 1955, the IRS has established earlier due dates for many information returns that provide numbers feeding into Form 1040, such as Forms 1099 and W-2, both of which are due January 31st, to ensure that most taxpayers are able to file by tax day. Now, in 2016, the IRS pushed the due date of other returns forward a month to March 15th, again in an effort to allow more individuals timely file. So why is it later this year? We talked about how we were going to get into that. The mid-April date seems to work for the majority of taxpayers. In most years anyhow, according to the IRS, about 90% of taxpayers were able to file their returns by the deadline in 2021, with the other 10% requesting a 6-month extension to file. But for the tax year 2022, about 19 million taxpayers extended their returns, a significant increase from prior years due to the increased complexity of the tax code brought on by temporary provisions related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So why is tax day this year today, April 18th versus the 15th? Anytime a deadline falls on a Saturday or Sunday, the IRS pushes the due date to the following Monday, which would have been April 17th, 2023 this year, which was yesterday. However, any federal holiday also pushes the date back. So since Emancipation Day, which usually falls on April 16th, is observed in Washington, D.C. on April 17th this year, the tax day was pushed back to an additional day to today, Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. So while having a tax deadline of April 18th happens only about every 6 years, the IRS occasionally pushes back the filing deadline for emergency situations like natural disasters, although these are often local. So for example, the IRS extended the original due date of individual tax returns in disaster areas in Alabama, California, and Georgia until October 16th, 2023 this year. Similarly, the IRS pushed the national deadline back to July 15th in 2020 in the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the government definitely adjusts those dates according as needed. So that gives you a little history on what is tax day, how it got started, and where it is today, and why today is tax day. So stay with me as we keep visiting people, places, and things in our community, and we'll talk soon. Have a great day, everyone.